Hope. It's a word we hear often, but what does it truly mean to live with hope? In a world that can feel chaotic, uncertain, even hostile, where do we find the strength to keep moving forward, to create beauty from the ashes? Today, we invite you into a powerful conversation that blends faith, art, and the enduring virtue of hope. Robin Miller, a Los Angeles-based professional artist and educator, will take us on a journey of seeing the divine through creation, of contemplating beauty in the ordinary, and of learning how art itself becomes a vessel for hope. This is more than just a talk. It's a reflection, a challenge, an invitation. How do we, in the face of a world that often seems to resist it, become pilgrims of hope? How do we take what is broken and, like an artist before a blank canvas, shape it into something meaningful, something transcendent? Stay with us, because what Robin has to share may just transform the way you see yourself, the world, and the creative hand of God moving in all things. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more inspiring talks that bring virtue into action in your life. And now, let's throw it over to Robin Miller.
The goal for this talk is a reflection on the Christian perspective of creation, and we want to heighten our awareness of our unique personal context in creation, in the situation that God has given us, both internally, like who I am inside myself, and then how I relate to the world around me, including the material world, the things that I work with at work, the people I work with, my family, my friends. So it's the externals. So the internals and how those internals combine with the externals. But I'm really coming at this, the externals meaning creation. So specifically the created universe. So here's my title, Dancing in the Fire, Hope in the Face of a Pagan Culture and a Means to Transmit the Hope to Others. So throughout human existence, humans have been making art. And we know that because of the Lascaux caves and other caves that are prehistoric. But there's art on those caves. People have been asking the question, what does life mean? Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? And that is often a theme in art. And this is a painting by Gauguin when he was in Tahiti. And that's the title. Where do we come? I'm not going to read it in French because I don't know French. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? And this, a lot of times, helps us understand our identity, our origin, and then also our purpose. And purpose implies our end, our teleos. And we want to keep, throughout our lives, we want to keep interrogating ourselves. Where did I come from? The better we know ourselves, the more richly we understand our past and our present. Who am I? And we have a better understanding of where we're headed. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The Bible starts with this sentence. And we have the assumption of God, and not everybody does. In my lifetime, I remember in an independent school that was not religious, we started the day with the Pledge of Allegiance, which we don't say in school anymore very much, and the Lord's Prayer. And there was just an assumption. And I remember one time standing next to a Jewish girl, and I noticed that she wasn't praying the Lord's Prayer. And I said, why aren't you praying the Lord's Prayer? And she said, because I'm Jewish. I thought, okay, like no big deal. We have to be very, very sensitive about what assumptions we make, but also not to be afraid when somebody believes differently than we do. And a lot of the things that we have a point of view about influence how we think about other things without our realizing it. So we want to be, doing talks like this and reading and thinking helps us understand our own point of view more deeply so that we can then understand other people's point of view. God saw that creation was good, and we want to continue to keep in mind that it's good. It's so easy. There's so much in culture that is negative, that is degrading of creation in ways that because of how we receive popular culture, we're not even aware of it. So it's very, very good to have to remind ourselves of the goodness of creation and to draw from that God's glory. And for Catholics, the Mass is an ongoing, constant singing and prayer to God of gratitude and appreciation of His glory, worship. The Psalms are wonderful music of singing God's praise, many of them. Then shall all the trees of the wood sing for joy before the Lord, for He comes. And there's a little anticipation of hope. He comes. We're anticipating, we're hoping, but we're also living God's presence simultaneously while we're hoping for a fuller appreciation of Him, a fuller reception of Him. We at the same time are fully receiving Him. And then the Advent liturgy says, mountains and hills will sing praises before God, and all the trees of the wood will clap their hands. For the Lord is coming, the ruler, to an eternal kingdom. The language is so beautiful. And just to savor to try to enter into the psalmist's mind and think about the point of view of the psalmist, maybe King David, as he's writing this, and think about the attitude of the writer in order to come, of course, this is divinely inspired scripture, but also the synchronicity of the writer with God while he's writing. The trees of the wood will clap their hands. How celebratory is that? All creation is singing praises to God. There was a really great article about, and the point of view was how it boosts your immune system. And one of the things that has become apparent to me is there is a lot of awesomeness of the world around us. You think you can get into your car and turn it on and it starts. And it goes for 300 or 400 miles without refueling. And you can go anywhere you want. And sometimes traffic is heavy, but basically everybody's kind of cooperating on the road all at the same time. It's all coordinated and everybody adheres basically to the same rules. And people's cars don't just stop. They don't just quit in the middle of the road. That we can count on getting from point A to point B. And that somebody built the freeway and somebody built the street and somebody built the drains so that the rainwater goes into the sewer. And somebody painted the lines on the street. And somebody put the lights up so the street is lit. And it's so useful to think about all the systems in the city, in our sphere around us. We flip the light switch and the lights come on. And it is awesome. The fact that we can walk around and all the systems of our bodies. So giving thanks to God for all the things around us is not only healthy for us, but it cultivates our appreciation and our thankfulness and our wonder at the world around us and our joy. There was a blurb I was reading that talked about how there have been saints who have said, and there wasn't a direct quote, but it struck me that walking through the fields with the sun hitting the grass and the grass is glowing, and poets who often, writers will know, you have words going through your head all the time, and you see things that other people might not notice. And those things sometimes shout at you out loud, like, you've got to write this down. You've got to reflect on this. And so it was so beautiful. The saints say to the grass, stop shouting, this beauty around me. Stop shouting at me. Let me do my thing. So we appreciate nature around us, and then we can reflect that to others. And God has this idea to make man in his image and likeness, and we are God's work of art. We are the pinnacle of creation, and simultaneously we're infinitely small. So the Greeks understood this very well. They understood the majesty of humanity. And that was without divine revelation. And they understood that the goal of humanity is to develop oneself. And that ideals in art reflected the ideals about humanity. And also the virtue, beauty, is a form that the beauty in the work of art and the technical proficiency is a manifestation of the character, not only of the maker, but of the culture in which this art is situated. And these are, as you probably know, the Greeks perfected the art of creating human contrapposto, human life likeness in art. They created them in bronze. So that's even higher. Bronze casting is an amazingly technical feat. And those were melted down by other cultures to use as whatever you use bronze for, namely weapons, I think. And these are Roman copies of those Greek sculptures. So the Romans also were technically proficient in carving marble. And then the highest character of humanity is revealed by Jesus Christ in self-sacrificing love. And this is a Velázquez crucifixion. Again, the understanding so much of culture after the Romans and the conversion of the Roman culture to Christianity happened gradually. And then it culminated in the Renaissance, where the representation of a beautiful human also was a reflection of the character of that person. And basic assumptions formed. And at this time also, we're headed into Protestantism, where we're focusing more on internal attributes and subjective characteristics, but we still have, it's more humanistic, and beauty and virtue are connected. And we see that in in Michelangelo's David. And we want to think about how virtue of humanity is manifested by the beauty in the art and the character of the person. So David's just getting ready to face Goliath the giant, and we see in the expression of the character of David, this focus, this I'm facing up to a very fearful situation and literally staring it down, and his willingness not to crumble in fear, but to carry on, to fulfill his task. And the detail of the eyes, this is a giant sculpture. If you've ever seen it in real life, it's like 3 times the size of a normal person. So it's quite overwhelming, and you have a hard time thinking of the David and Goliath story because it's like you're looking up at Goliath there. And so that's kind of an interesting twist also, like really, who's the Goliath of character in this story? It's David. We want to be able to be living in that joy, even when we face challenge. And modernism kind of flies in the face of that. Modernism is an outgrowth of the idea that man is dominant on the earth and man does not need God. And a lot of the fruit of that is, frankly, ugly art that affronts us, that flies in the face of our sensibilities, that is objectively ugly. And that was very difficult for me personally, because that's not what I try to focus on in my work. I try to make my work, the immediate reaction is I want to hear that's beautiful. And then I know that I've closed the loop, that it's the seed in my creative sensibility that I then created something, and then the person who views it says that's beautiful. We've had a connection, and my art has fulfilled one of its purposes. So the point here that I want to make is that human beings in making art are fulfilling the seed that God planted in that person, in that artist, to make something. And they are making something from their point of view. And they're limited. All of us are limited by the context of our existence. So de Kooning, and also our point of view, what we want to accomplish. So this artist, you can see it's painted in 1950. And I remember I had an art history teacher in college who kept talking about the rapacious mouth. The rapacious mouth. You can see, I don't know if you can see in the screen very well, but she's got teeth that are like a skull. Like if you stripped away, you have very strong sense of her teeth like shark's teeth or razors. And he wants to turn the woman from the ideal, the idol, the Venus, and subvert conventions and strip away the reverence and the fear of the feminine, but turn it around and make her fearful. And this is a later one, another variation on the theme of woman, and talking about feminine liberation and restraining from social norms, and also making her more abstract so she is less human. So the art is definitely reflecting the philosophical orientation of the times. And we're also being told that this is art, that the experts are telling us this is art and you have to accept this as the truth. And I propose that there is a level of expertise that makes it worthy of consideration just on the basis of the amount of work that an artist has put into their work. So they have been working on their art they have been thinking about art and working on art for a long period of time, and they're educated about it. Okay. Then they've practiced their medium for a time. Okay, perhaps they've earned degrees, so they have the bona fides of their practice. Or they simply put themselves out there and say, I'm an artist. Okay, but it's also up to us to say whether we like it or not. And that's perfectly legitimate. I accept what you're saying in your work as what you're saying in your work. And I also reserve the right to have an opinion about it. And then we also want to be able to understand why we're reacting the way we do to the work. So here I'm saying with this slide, all artists, and in fact, all humans, seek to discover the meaning of life. And artists try to discover the meaning through their work. So that's our common ground. That's where we can meet. Even if I don't like what I'm seeing, I can still have a conversation about what is it you're trying to say. Just tell me what you're trying to say. And when an artist says, well, it's up to you to draw any conclusions, well, then it makes it very hard to have a conversation. So that's okay. All right. So I'll just move on to the next painting or the next piece. We don't have to be intimidated when we can't come to a conclusion about something, because it's kind of up to the artist to help us along, because they're presenting something and it's up to them to explain it. For the purpose of communication, at the very least. Does anybody recognize this place? Yeah, UCLA Sculpture Garden. And the phenomenon of a sculpture garden is very interesting when you think about how people try to get into nature, especially in a city, especially where we're surrounded by concrete and vertical straight walls. And this is smack in the middle of the UCLA campus, well, in the north end anyway. And it's very organic. And there are lots of sculptures, all different kinds, spread throughout. And it's very peaceful walking through there. And even it's kind of funny because you walk through there and it's like kind of off to the side. And people who walk through there generally look like they're deliberately walking through there. Like you kind of have to go out of your way. And there are people sitting on the grass. There are little concrete nooks where you can sit. And it's very meditative. And there aren't any signs saying, please be quiet or don't litter, or it's just there's something about the space that feels very meditative and very respectful. And that's a very interesting combination of elements of nature natural creation, organic creation, and human creation, very deliberate, for their own sake, sculptures. So these are some comments from various articles on the garden. It not only clarifies modern sculpture, but also champions sculpture in general. It makes the objects in it as important as buildings and trees, as essential as architecture and nature. Sculpture here seems part of all creative life, including nature. And that was the thing that there's this conversation going on between all the elements, very much a man-created, human-created environment, and elements of nature. There is a spiritual calling to unite all forms of creation, and that creation is good. So all the aspects of cooperation of all the people who had the idea to do the sculpture garden and then actually make the sculpture garden, and the people who enjoy it, that there's something good about building this. And it's good about it's going to be good for the people who are going to be walking through here. It's good for our community. So this is what it started out as. It was a parking lot. So they sacrificed a parking lot. And this is a building here, building here, building here. And then over on this side, there's a library and then a long bridge. And then there's another building here. So vision, human vision, like this is a parking lot and we're going to have this amazing place in its place. So they take out the asphalt and they go down to the dirt, and that's it. I think this is exactly the same point of view. And this is that bridge I was talking about. So that's kind of cool too. Like, they didn't have to put a bridge there. They could have just put another walkway, but it adds a lot of variety. I remember when I was a little kid, and I always thought, this is kind of magical going across this bridge. And that's the kind of thing that you want going through people's minds, is like, I'm in a different space. This is a space where I can remove myself from my normal routine and be kind of engaged in a way that I'm not engaged just walking down the street. The garden isn't necessarily frozen in time, but it does have a certain integrity to it. If you destroy that integrity, it's just sculpture and landscape as separate things. It's the relationship of the sculpture to the landscape and of the sculptures to each other that form integral pieces. And that's something you have to preserve, but it doesn't mean it can't allow for change. So it's not so much the quote itself, but the way people think about the garden, that it's an interaction, it's a relationship. So Robert Graham did the sculpture of Our Lady at the entrance to the cathedral. She's up above the door. And so the reason I put these in here is because we're kind of getting back to, remember Woman 1 in 1950, and now in 1978, we're getting back to, hey, wait a minute. Maybe humans aren't so bad after all. Maybe there is some beauty in the form. And the funny thing is, that's kind of what happened in art schools as well, where people were realizing, if we don't do figure drawing, then we're not going to be able to draw the human form. And I think animation is a huge instigator of that people realized the animators were really good drawers and that there was something lost. So this is another figure. And also the beauty of motion, the way the human form, you watch a gymnast in the Olympics and you go, hey, I can do that. And then you try like doing a cartwheel and it's like, not so much. And this is talking about the character of the artist, that they are admiring Robert Graham because he demanded to do things on his own terms and did them with incredible excellence. So the fact that Robert Graham was an excellent sculptor raises the whole level of the people who are observing his work, and he had everyone's respect for it. And there's something about having respect for someone that's good for you. So it's not only that they're admiring Robert Graham, but in admiring him, they themselves become better people. So as you know, we have a Jubilee year of hope right now. And so how the thing here too is, how does art create hope? And I'll just read this. The spiritual dimension of the Jubilee, which calls for conversion, should also embrace these fundamental aspects of our life in society as part of a coherent whole, in the realization that all of us are pilgrims on this earth, which the Lord has charged us to till and keep. May we never fail in the course of our sojourn to contemplate the beauty of creation and care for our common home. So in contemplating beauty of creation, we are converted, we are lifted up, we become higher people. We better ourselves, and we cohere with each other. We have a better understanding of each other, and we're more unified. It has been said, observing children making art, that one interpretation of their art making is that they are creating meaning of the world around them. And another way of saying it is that they are discovering meaning, that they are using their imagination to manifest their ideals, to create a world that they would aspire to. Like, I want to live in this place. I want to live in my imagination. And they can make it real by making art. And they discover the meaning, the purpose, the beauty of their world by making art. And I would call it, as a Christian, I would say that we do not make meaning, we discover the meaning as it is revealed to us by grace. So we want to look at art as a way that artists discover meaning. How is this artist, even if it's something that we feel uncomfortable with, what is it about this artist that they're seeking, they're pinging out there in the world, they're pinging their own mind to discover the meaning of their life and the meaning of the world around them. And the modernism is often nihilistic. It often leads to nihilism. It often leads to despair, because it often says that life is meaningless, that it's all just here and now, and that it doesn't move to anything. And we know as Christians that creation exists because God called it into existence because of his love. And so we never despair, because we can look around at the world around us and say, there is love in every atom of existence. And God did not create us like Ritz crackers, like we're not stamped in a factory. Each one of us, God called each one of us into being with an explicit, with a clear purpose and a uniqueness, even if our circumstances were not ideal, that he called each one of us into being. So we can even start with ourselves. And we also have a mission. All right. So St. Josemaría said, dream and your dreams will fall short. And God has created within us a vision for our lives. And we as artists, creativity in any act we do, in any job we have, as we get better, as we get more skilled, we become artists at our job. And we have the seeds for excellence, for the vision of the finished product that's already inside us as we begin to work and we see the finished product. And then it can, when it's fulfilled, we often have a sense of satisfaction because it's the vision realized. And those dreams come from our Creator. Our calling discloses to us the meaning of our existence. It means being convinced through faith of the reason for our life and on earth. Our life, the present, past, and future, acquires a new dimension, a depth we did not perceive before. All happenings and events now fall within their true perspective. We understand where God is leading us, and we feel ourselves borne along by this task entrusted to us. And here's from John Paul II, letter to artists. Through his artistic creativity, man appears more than ever in the image of God, and he accomplishes this task above all in shaping the wondrous material of his own humanity and then exercising creative dominion over the universe which surrounds him. So again, the point being, each one of us has a certain dominion, and we have a certain chunk of existence that has been entrusted to us and that we're called to shape according to God's will. And therefore, that should give us a lot of hope, because we have a mission in life. We have a purpose from our loving creator God. There are a couple of points I want to make about that, again, not to be intimidated by the art world, but to kind of this should serve as ammunition. And this is a quote from this book, Creative Intuition in Art and Poetry by Jacques Maritain. And it talks about where the artistic impulse comes from. And there's a lot of, again, where artists say, well, it's how I perceive the world, and I am making art according to my perceptions, my orientation. Now, what we receive when we make ourselves thus open to the work of art is not a participation in the subjectivity or the subjective feelings of the poet. The process of which I am speaking is quite different from such a kind of Einfühlung. That's a German word, which I have no idea what it means. We keep our identity. We are not interested in commingling ourselves with the self of another. A mixing of subjectivities is by no means attractive, especially if you don't think that artist is a particularly attractive person. You don't want to mingle your subjectivity with that person. It would be a kind of spiritual unchastity. We are even more interested in what the poet has grasped in things than in grasping of himself, which, however, was the most important thing for him. So the artist is interested in himself, and we're interested in the thing of the art. What we receive, though it may be partially or deficiently, is an intellectual gift, a participation in the poetic knowledge and poetic intuition through which the poet has perceived a certain unique mystery in the mystery of the world. So the artist has grasped something mysterious, and then somehow that mystery has been infused into the art, and then we receive that mystery, whatever it is. So that's just a thought to put in your mind. And that's where we connect. So now I'm also trying to get us to think about the world around us, the city, and how it was just a bunch of dirt at one point. And people got together and said, let's build something. And people didn't say, oh, that's stupid, let's not. They said, okay, and how are we going to do that? Where are all the supplies going to come from? And it kind of looks funny. New 50-foot boulevard starts here. Like, really? That's dirt. And the sign, I don't know if you can see it, but it says Westwood. And now that's what they built. I mean, gradually over time, but it's really amazing. Then we had other problems. Okay, we're a city built around cars, and this is around 1970, and it's smog. And you've got this gridded out city that's planned and thoughtful, and we have a music center, and we have the civic center, and isn't it all coherent and organized? And yet we can't breathe. So they figured it out. So we can solve problems. We can make life even better. We still appreciate beauty. We still appreciate the Sistine Chapel. So a few years ago, they restored the ceiling, and it was kind of scandalous because it's like, well, it's supposed to be all waxy and ugly. And it's like, well, no, actually it wasn't. And Michelangelo was quite a colorist, and you can see it's not just the photograph. They just popped. And then there's beauty and suffering, and how there are people who can smile in the face of horror. That God's greatest creation is humanity, and we're at our greatest when we will die or suffer for others. And we see actually death as a means to achieve our end, which is union with God. Thomas More's sense of humor in making jokes at his execution, and hopefully we'll all just be laughing at this at the end. And Father Damien of Molokai, who deliberately went to care for lepers, knowing that he would probably contract leprosy, and he fulfilled his calling. And Maximilian Kolbe volunteering himself for the life of others. Do you know about Corrie ten Boom? She hid Jews in World War II in Holland in her house, and was arrested. Somebody betrayed her family, and she was arrested. All her family were arrested and sent to concentration camp. And and this is her description of the prison. It was in only one way was this new cell an improvement over the first one. It had a window. 7 iron bars ran across it, 4 bars up and down. It was high in the wall, much too high to look out of. But through those 28 squares, I could see the sky. All day, I kept my eyes fixed on that bit of heaven. Sometimes clouds moved across the squares, white or pink or edged with gold. And when the wind was from the west, I could hear the sea. Best of all, for nearly an hour each day, gradually lengthening as the spring sun rose higher, a shaft of checkered light streamed into the dark little room. As the weather turned warmer and I grew stronger, I would stand up to catch the sunshine on my face and chest, moving along the wall with the moving light, climbing at last onto the cot to stand on tiptoe in the final rays. So just being able to appreciate light and the sky and to let that kind of sink in to her soul and give her comfort was very, very powerful. And so those saints were able to make of their lives the work of art that God intended, because all through their lives they had this practice of giving glory to God. And we can make the connection with artists and with others when we seek the beauty in life, when we probe life for its meaning constantly, and we sensitize ourselves to the fact that there's purpose and beauty in all of God's creation. And that will help us see the beauty in others and also achieve the purpose for which we are created. And the prayers of our faith are a means to that end, among other things. The end. Thank you very much for listening.